Hello?
Hey, it's Patrick.
Okay, thank you so much, Patrick, for joining me. You're the last guest in this last half an hour segment. So you're actually replacing Patty Lavera, who is going to be on. You're from Food and Water Watch,
Yes.
and we're going to talk about this incredible Dow Chemical and Dupont announced Friday they are merging in a $130 billion chemical industry mega deal. The merger would combine two companies that sell agricultural products to millions of farmers around the world and make a variety of chemicals for consumer and industrial products ranging from electronics, automobiles, and household goods to building materials and safety equipment. And the two companies will form Dow DuPont, then separate into three independent publicly traded companies focused on agriculture, material science, and specialty products. So we're going to talk about foodopoly, the battle over the future of food and farming in America.
Sure.
Okay. And you were on this show like at least a year or so ago. So yeah, talk about this crazy merger.
Yeah, I mean, this is the one of the biggest deals of the year. It's as you said, it would create a $130 billion company, the second biggest chemical company in the world. It is on the agriculture side. It's going to sell $19 billion worth of seeds and agri-chemicals like pesticides and herbicides, and they will have a dominant position in the seed industry. They'll sell about 40% of both corn and soybean seeds. So for farmers, this is a huge deal, right? So farmers are right now getting kind of terrible prices, but they'll be buying more and more seeds from a company that essentially can impose price hikes on them. So it creates basically a duopoly between Monsanto on one side and Dow DuPont on the other. And this kind of massive concentration is contributing to the decline in the number of farms, the economic viability of farms, the choices and opportunities that farmers have, but also on the other side for consumers in terms of the kinds of products that we can buy, food that we can buy for our families, the kinds of supermarkets we can shop at, all of these things. I mean, this has been a crazy year for mergers. Already, there have been $2 trillion worth of mergers in the U.S. economy, including a lot of truly mammoth mergers in the food sector, including right now a pending Anheuser-Busch Miller Beer merger, the Kraft Heinz merger, and tons of mergers in the supermarket space, including Ahold and the Food Lion Giant deal, which is a giant, enormous supermarket deal. So it's been a crazy year. All of this concentration in all parts of the food chain essentially been reverberating backwards and forwards. So the supermarkets merge so they can get better deals when they buy from the manufacturing companies, and they merge so they can get better deals buying from the ingredient companies, and now the seed companies are merging. Really what we have is a tiny number of firms sitting between 2 million farmers and 315 million eaters in America. And those firms, as they get bigger and consolidate, are able to suck all of the value out of the system, and farmers are making less and consumers are paying more, and all of us have fewer choices.
I wanted to just add that, I mean, it wasn't bad enough that farmers were getting beat up by Monsanto. I mean, Monsanto itself is just this kind of huge chemical bully, genetically modified company, really giving and making it impossible for farmers. And now there's, what is it, Dow DuPont?
Right. And so essentially farmers that grow corn and soybeans, which are a giant chunk of the kind of row crop farmers in America, are going to basically have a choice between buying from seeds from Monsanto or buying seeds from DuPont. And it's even more complicated than that, though, because a large amount of the biotechnology traits, the GMO traits, are owned by Monsanto and then cross-licensed to DuPont and Dow. So it really is a situation where, it doesn't matter which seed you buy, it all has the same couple of companies that own the intellectual property, the patents behind the seeds, and that gives them tremendous power over farmers in terms of the prices that they pay for seeds. And ultimately, this consolidation throughout the food chain means that they're paying more when they buy supplies like seeds and like fertilizer, and they're getting less when they sell into a consolidated grain market and consolidated food manufacturing sector.
Oh, dear. It looks like I gotta call him back. Patrick?
Yes, I'm sorry.
Oh, that's okay. How many farms, are there many farms left in the United States?
Yes, there are over 2 million farms in the United States, and a large number of them produce a couple of key crops, things like corn and soybeans, and there are a giant number of smaller farms, the kinds that do the community-supported agriculture and local organic farms, but there are still 2 million plus farms in America. And what we have is, as I said, is basically an hourglass system where there are 2 million farmers separated from about 315 million eaters by a handful of companies in each link of the food chain. They're becoming more consolidated. You have Dow DuPont merging, you have the Kraft merging with Heinz, you have a bunch of supermarket mergers. So all of these mergers mean that in the middle, there are just a few choices, and these bigger companies exert more power. They push down on the price they pay to farmers, but ultimately raise the price that they charge consumers.
And is this just a U.S. issue, or it's affecting everybody, farmers worldwide?
Well, this will affect farmers worldwide. The two companies combined sell 17% of global pesticides and herbicides. So that's an enormous deal, and that's worldwide. So they're very powerful on that front. And that, again, when farmers are purchasing supplies, the inputs that they use to grow their crops, they are going to fewer and fewer places. These companies also have agreements with the seed dealerships and the farm supply stores, which means that, in some cases, often what we're hearing is that farmers have very few choices about the kinds of seeds they want to produce. So, for example, it's very hard to find non-GMO corn and non-GMO soybeans in many parts of the country. It's just not that easy. And so when more of them merge, it becomes even harder for farmers to make choices. And obviously, when only a few companies sell, they can easily raise prices.
I don't know if you're familiar with this documentary. I watched it on Netflix. It's called GMO OMG. And
Yeah.
he was actually able to show and prove that growing seeds naturally is better. Like there's this whole argument. I forget the exact details, but that whole argument. It's ridiculous, first of all, to just to try to say that anything that man does is better than the way that nature does things. It's just completely ludicrous, and yet, that's what they try to argue. But he proved in this documentary. I urge people to watch it. It's really good and kind of heartwarming and heartbreaking. But he really makes the point that doing things the organic way works better, and more, and it's more cost effective.
Yeah, I'm aware of the documentary, but I haven't seen it myself. I mean, obviously the chemical companies argue that the only way to produce seeds is through this genetic engineering of the seed, the germplasm in the seed, and there's been lots of evidence that ordinary crop breeding works as well or better and much cheaper than the genetic engineering. So when you're talking about something like developing more drought tolerant crops, actually the traditional way of crop breeding is every bit or more effective than the doing it in the lab. So that's definitely true.
Can you just describe a little bit what crop breeding is?
Sure. Rather than genetically splicing material from other plants, what you do is you take and look. Remember, most of the genetically engineered crops are not engineered for magical crop properties. They're engineered to be tolerant of the branded herbicide. So that's what a Roundup Ready crop is. This is corn that you can spray a herbicide on and it won't die. And so that's the vast bulk of the genetic engineered crop traits are these herbicide tolerant crops. But if you're talking about doing something to make a more resilient crop, one that is more resistant to disease or one that's more resistant to weather patterns, or particularly drought tolerant crops are very things that people are very interested now, especially with what's been going on in California. Then what you do is you take the plants that do best under drought conditions and you crossbreed them with one another, but from the same family of plants. And this is something that's been going on with something like corn for thousands of years in Mexico, where there are many varieties of corn that are produced there, and that they have been interbreeding the various corn varieties to get the ones that have the best yield and are most drought tolerant and better in different soils. And obviously, we're talking about a whole country that is growing corn, and yet we're generally producing one kind of feed corn, which is and industrial corn for food manufacturers and for feeding to livestock and to go into ethanol and stuff. And all of that is generally one kind of yellow corn. And ultimately, we have a country that has great variation. Growing corn in Texas is different than growing it in Illinois, different than growing it in central Pennsylvania. And those kinds of crop breeding for local conditions is something that used to happen in the United States at the agricultural universities, public universities that have big agriculture programs that were designed to actually provide local research into local crop types and local livestock types and local production. And much of that has gone by the wayside. The universities still exist, but they're now partnering with the biggest agribusinesses. And so rather than providing local advice to farmers, they're often kind of helping with the research projects of the biggest agribusiness firms.
So it sounds so much like like these corporations that want to deny and fund to help to keep climate change and deny climate change. Just recently with the COP21, there's Exxon. I mean, they know the truth, and then they fund the opposite of it. And so, I mean, with this Dow Dupont merger, I mean, what is the health of this, what they're doing, and all these chemicals? How is that going to affect the health? I mean, because naturally chemicals are not healthy.
Yes, that's the side and pesticide and herbicide. Obviously, they're poisons, and they're designed to kill plants and weeds and bugs. So, I mean, I think what you're kind of getting at is that the charm offensive by the biotechnology industry is extremely powerful, and they have kind of made it sound like they're the saviors of the agricultural world. They're doing more to raise more plants with less water, and they're all about the environment and sustainability. And they have a huge amount of money that they can spend putting out this PR offensive. It's all public relations, right? Because really what they're selling is primarily pesticides and herbicides, as you said. And obviously, when you have a situation where you have two of these big companies joining, it's not just the joining of their products and not just the joining of their marketing, but it also is the joining of their political power. So you have a company that it is by itself going to be considerably stronger, and it will have more ability to push out its PR pablum to, and it's having great effect on the kind of broader questions, public policy questions. Can we label GMO foods? The role of biotechnology in international trade deals, the amount that they can charge for seeds, and a whole bunch of other things where their added political muscle is going to be combined with their market power and is, as you suggest, potentially very deceptive.
I mean, I'm afraid to ask you this question because I feel like it's going to be a silly question. I mean, what about like governmental regulations? I mean, okay, I'm just going to use the banks, for example. I mean, we've already learned by having the, banks be so big that they're become too big to fail, and yet they continue to allow, corporations to just get so huge in all these mergers. I mean, naturally, the bigger they allow these companies to get, the government's already lost control over banks and other corporations. I mean, so is that it? Like the government just lost control?
Well, so I think this has been a huge problem, is that largely the antitrust regulators, the people inside the government that are supposed to make sure that the companies don't become so big that they can abuse their market power and disadvantage people. These are old statutes. These are statutes from the progressive era at the turn of the 19th to 20th century. And these laws on the books are actually very strong and are designed to prevent mergers that are create companies that are too big and are basically unfair in the marketplace. For the last 30 years or so, these antitrust regulators have largely been asleep at the switch, and they've let the companies merge and merge and merge and merge and merge, and now they're so big that it becomes difficult for them to weigh in. In the past year, they have actually blocked a handful of mergers that were absurdly big. The Cisco U.S. Foods food delivery company, which would have created essentially one national company that dominated all others. They blocked that merger. They've blocked a couple of other big mergers or created situations where companies backed away. But they also have approved a tremendous number of utterly enormous mergers, ones that I believe will disadvantage consumers and farmers. So this merger is exactly like that. It is one that is creating a considerably bigger company, and a company that will really have the market power to boss around other companies, and particularly the people they sell to. When you control this much of the market, and you can force the prices on to the people that are paying, and in this case, it's the farmers. So this is really a case where it's way past time for the antitrust cops to actually patrol the beat and make sure that these mergers don't get too out of control. And this is one that we believe that the Justice Department should stand up and block, because it's a situation where it's getting bigger, and it's already, the response in the marketplace is, well, if this merger is going to occur, maybe Monsanto should buy Syngenta, or there are two other companies, Bayer and BASF, maybe they should be merging with one another. And this is the kind of cascade of mergers that we've seen over the past couple of years. As I said, this has been a merger mania year, and we've been saying it all for the last 18 months that these mergers have been accelerating. The size of the mergers is getting bigger, and the federal regulators are stepping up, but only when the merger is utterly absurd. And a kind of Coke-Pepsi merger, they might step up and block. But these mergers that are huge but not quite that big have actually not risen to the level of the Justice Department standing up for the people and blocking these absurd mergers.
Is there any way for farmers to merge? Like, why can't all farmers, what did you say there were 2 million farms in the United States?
It's more than 2 million, yeah. And so,
I mean, why isn't that a possibility? I mean, because something has to be done to counter.
So some farmers do have marketing cooperatives, right, where hundreds of farmers sell their crop together, and they get the benefit, and they buy supplies together, and that gives them a little bit more market power to get a better price. And generally, this is kind of a good way for farmers to band together to get some power in the marketplace. But over the last 20, 30 years, some portion of the biggest pool of these co-ops have actually kind of turned into corporations. They're still not officially nonprofit co-ops, but if you were to hear their names, you would be stunned that they were co-ops. Land O'Lakes is a co-op, but it acts like a Fortune 500 company. And there are others out there that are co-ops as well. Many of the single crop fruit operations are co-ops. Sunkist is a co-op. So some of them have grown beyond their traditional bounds and are now acting more like corporations than they are like representatives of farms. And I think Land O'Lakes is probably and Dairy Farmers of America are 2 examples of where they're more like corporations than they are like co-ops anymore. But that is one way for farmers to band together, and that's historically been a great way. Forming cooperatives to jointly market their crops and buy supplies is a great way for farmers to kind of have countervailing market power in the face of these mega mergers. But the reality is it's not going to be possible for farmers to easily do that. Farmers are notoriously independent. They prefer often to work by themselves and to market their own crops or their own livestock. And it's very, very difficult for them to stand up to the intense market power, especially with the hyper consolidation in the agriculture industry. On the selling side, the firms that sell supplies like fertilizer and seeds, and on the buying side, the meat packers, the grain companies, obviously the food manufacturers themselves further up the chain. The Kraft Heinz merger is a great example.
Is there anything the people can do to break or to stop this merger? I mean, is it already done? Is it a done deal? The Dow Dupont merger?
No. The Justice Department is going to look at this very closely, and the piece that is considered to be the most difficult is the agri-chemical side, the seeds and the herbicides and pesticides. We are going to work hard with our farm allies and with antitrust academic experts to try and push the Justice Department to block this merger because it is such a tough deal for farmers. I think there'll be very, very close scrutiny of this deal by Congress from both Republican and Democratic members who are concerned about the impact this kind of deal will have on farmers. It is not a done deal. The Justice Department can and should block this deal, and I think there'll be lots of farm and rural and consumer groups that'll be asking the Justice Department to stand up and block this merger.
What would, again, like the effect on the climate be? Because they just had the COP21, farce, which a lot of people were calling it, in Paris, because it's like the same thing, just corporations doing what they always do, pretending to care about the environment and, greenwashing their image when they're just continuing to do the same thing over and over again. And I also wanted to ask about the effect of these chemicals on the tragic bee situation that we're experiencing. If you can answer that.
Yes, I can take a stab at answering both these questions. So I think that on the question of climate, I don't know whether these two firms themselves were engaged in that question at the COP21 or not. And obviously we share your skepticism of the final deal. It is sort of a greenwashing situation. Obviously, the asking these firms to actually step up and fix the climate situation, they are to some greater or lesser extent all participants in part of the corporate ignorance of the climate situation that we've gotten ourselves into. Obviously agriculture has an impact on climate. This kind of the broad use of some of these pesticides obviously have some, as you suggested, some severe environmental implications. I don't think either of these firms are the biggest manufacturer of the pesticides that have been most scrutinized over the bee issue, which are the neonicotinoids, which I think are made by Syngenta. But obviously this is a significant situation and one that we're paying attention to.
You said something, and then I had a comment, and it flew out of my head. So I'm just going to read the woman who actually wrote the Foodopoly, the battle over the future of food and farming in America, said that just a handful of large chemical companies, including Dow and Dupont, already control most of the seed supply used to grow crops like corn and soybeans, as well as the herbicides and genetically engineered seeds are designed to be grown with. Any merger that consolidates this market into fewer hands will give farmers fewer choices and put them at even more economic disadvantage. And it will make it harder for agriculture to get off the GMO chemical treadmill that just keeps increasing in speed. The Department of Justice needs to block this merger to prevent the further corporate control of the basic building blocks of the food supply. Where can people get more information?
Well, there's more information on our website. Obviously, the statement is up there. It is foodandwaterwatch.org. And we have lots of information on the Foodopoly, the corporate control of the food system. We've covered this merger, and we've covered the range of mergers that have occurred over the past year, and have a lot of material on the impact of monopolization in the food supply, both for farmers and for consumers, for the economy, for rural America. It's been a pretty devastating effect for everybody. Everybody pays, except for the companies themselves, who have a stronger and stronger stranglehold on the entire food system.
I mean, it just, it's just crazy, like more and more corporate profit. I mean, like as if there's just like no end to it, and the corporations just want to continue until they destroy the planet. I mean, they have to be stopped.
Yeah, I mean, these are companies that are making a lot of money independently. Together, these two firms made $15 billion in profit last year, at about 18% of revenue. So these are not firms that are merging to become massively more efficient or more competitive. They're already very profitable firms.
I mean, don't these people, I just don't understand it. I mean, they have children, they have grandchildren. Don't they want to leave a planet to them? I mean, I know it's such a common sense question, but I don't get it.
Yeah, the size and scope of these deals really does boggle the mind. So, it's been a very crazy year. As I said, $2 trillion in mergers this year.
2 trillion. Uh, I mean, hasn't anybody ever heard of like an addiction problem and 12-step programs? I mean, again, it's just it's ridiculous that it's so unhealthy. It's just so unhealthy what they're doing, and they don't need the money, and they're just it's gone beyond, like you said before. I mean, it goes beyond just being healthy. And
Yeah, I think it'd be hard pressed to expect that the kind of shareholders and the corporate titans are going to back off their merger mania. But really, the people that should be stepping up are the people at the Justice Department. They could put a stop to this by really putting the brakes on a kind of rampant merger mania that's gone too far. And in the food system, we really are talking about the building blocks of the food that everybody eats every day and turning it over to a few firms who have obviously put their bottom line way ahead of the food that we eat, the choices that we make, and obviously, as you say, some of the kind of environmental and consumer choices and health that people are concerned about.
is there any way that the people can light a fire under the Justice Department?
Yes. Well, one thing to do is to contact your member of Congress and urge them to oppose this merger, and ask them to get their member of Congress to write to the Justice Department and ask them to block this merger. And obviously, you can contact the Justice Department directly. It's not maybe so straightforward, but that the Antitrust Division at the Department of Justice will take comments. And obviously, you can email to our website at our website. There's a way to comment on these kind of things, and we can make sure that your comments get to the Justice Department as well.
So if people go to Food and Water Watch and contact you guys, you can forward that to the Justice Department?
Accurate. We can absolutely do that.
Okay, that sounds, if people want to do that. So thank you so much, Patrick Woodall from Food and Water Watch.
Thank you, Catherine.
Have a nice holiday.
You too.
Okay, good night. So that pretty much wraps it up. Yeah, tonight was a little bit of a fly by the seat of my pants show because my first guest wasn't able to make it. Please go to Awake Radio and the number 1 on YouTube, and you'll find the Organic News podcast from this show. And there is a link to support this show and get information like this out there, because where else do you hear news, real news? And I want to wish everybody a happy holiday and speak truth to power. Good night.